He submitted a proposal for an addition to the International Residential Code. It's an appendix edition that describes hemp lime and hempcrete construction. On Saturday, the ICC committee gave it a recommendation for approval.
That's Jacob Waddell, Executive Director for the U.S. Hemp Building Association. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock. Today we're going to talk to Jacob about that big news that hemp has cleared the first hurdle in being added to the residential codes. This is a big deal for the hemp industry as it puts hempcrete on a path towards greater acceptance as a building material. We'll have a quick sponsor break, then come back with a few nuggets of hemp news, and then get into our interview. This episode is brought to you in part by IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. IND Hemp. All right, so just a couple of nuggets of hemp news for this week, this first full week of April 2022. Today is April 7th, 2022, for those of you keeping track of time at home. This first story comes from beefcentral.com. It says that feeding cattle industrial hemp may have a beneficial effect on their welfare. This is from a new study by Kansas State University. Michael Kleinhens, assistant professor of beef production medicine at Kansas State University's College of Veterinary Medicine, says that cattle experience a variety of stress and inflammation. He says that the data show how cannabinoids via industrial hemp decreased the stress hormone cortisol, as well as the inflammatory biomarker prostaglandin E2. This shows that hemp-containing cannabidioleic acid, or CBDA, may decrease stress and inflammation in cattle. Thus, hemp may be a natural way to decrease stress and inflammation related to production practices such as transportation and weaning, he says. He goes on to say that the new research helps them better understand how cannabinoids present in industrial hemp interact with bovine physiology and pharmacology. For instance, Kleinhen says, we now know that repeated daily doses of CBDA via feeding hemp does not result in accumulation of cannabinoids in the blood. Additionally, it solidified previous research and shows that each cannabinoid has its own absorption and elimination profile. Okay, and this next nugget of hemp news is a Pennsylvania Senate co-sponsorship memo from Pennsylvania Senators Judy Schwank and Sharif Street, both of whom have been on our podcast before. And their memo says, in the near future, we will be introducing language that would ban products being sold that contain Delta-8 THC made from hemp. Delta-8 THC is a naturally occurring compound in hemp in low concentrations. It can be manufactured in higher amounts by synthetically converting a better-known, non-intoxicating compound, CBD, into Delta-8 THC. These products are being sold in neighborhood gas stations and corner stores without any kind of regulation. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration in September of 2021 issued a warning about the potentially unsafe household chemicals sometimes used in converting CBD into Delta-8 THC, along with how Delta-8 manufacturing may happen in uncontrolled or unsanitary settings, which may lead to the presence of unsafe contaminants or other potentially harmful substances. A loophole in the 2018 Farm Bill allows Delta-8 THC to be unregulated at the federal level. That legislation legalized hemp, which is defined as a cannabis plant that contains 0.3% Delta-9 THC or less, levels considered too low to have a psychoactive effect. However, the bill does not address Delta-8 THC levels, an omission that makes it legal for vendors to sell the compound, often as edibles, vape cartridges, and tinctures, with no oversight. All right, so that's the news from where I'm sitting today. If you have any news items that you think I should know about, send them my way. You can email me, send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. And I'll have links to these two stories on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. All right, so let's get into today's interview. Jacob Waddell from the U.S. Hemp Building Association. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you here with us today. So I want to get into the work that you do and how you got there. But first, I want to just get into the big news that we all heard this week about the International Code Council giving approval to a hemp lime proposal. Can you tell me what's going on there?
Yes. So the codes in the United States are very splintered. So it's kind of a complicated situation. Simply put, the International Code Council is actually model codes for the United States that are also implemented in other countries. That's why it's called International Code. The International Residential Code is the section of the code describing residential buildings. There's also the International Building Code, which is for commercial buildings. So we submitted a proposal for an addition to the International Residential Code. It's an appendix edition that describes hemp lime and hempcrete construction. On Saturday, the ICC committee gave it a recommendation for approval. It will not be actually accepted until October. That's when it'll officially. But the fact that we got a recommendation for approval, we're pretty certain it's in there. Something really weird has to happen that I haven't heard of ever happening.
Okay. And so what? There's a comment period now, and then there's a final vote. You said in the fall.
Exactly. So right now is the public comment period. You can submit comments into the June 20th. From my understanding, the comments mostly are like changes you want in the code that has been accepted or recommended for approval, or if something was disapproved, you can make an argument on changes that will make it approved. At that point, there will be a committee hearing in September in Louisville, Kentucky, at which point there'll be a vote to like reopen the topic or the submission, and then another vote on whether that public comment is accepted or not.
Okay. Well, congratulations. I know you and your team have been working really hard on this for what, years probably, right?
Yeah. So the plan, I guess, at the founding of the USHBA, from my understanding, I wasn't there, but this was like a major goal or task they had. Now, about a little bit over a year ago, is when I really kind of got involved in the organization at the leadership level, and there was a plan sketched out on a theory on how we could get there. It ended up not being the plan we used. We had to basically adapt and figure it out as we went. And basically 6 months ago was really the kickoff for the push. At that point, we did fundraising with the USHBF's first event. That money allowed us to hire consultants. And in the last 6 months, we went from absolutely nothing to a completed document that was approved, recommended for approval. So a lot of hard work, a lot of negotiations between different parties, trying to come up with a grand compromise.
Okay. Well, so why is it important? Like, what changes now? Now that or that what will change? Once you have the approval in the fall, how is this going to affect like the building industry, the hemp industry, people who live in houses? What changes from this point?
Okay. Big key is legitimacy. Right now, in order to get a house built with hemp lime, you need to go through what's often called an alternative variance, the alternative material variance. You have to prove the material as good or better than approved materials. So it takes time. That can be like a 3-6 month time period. You have to get a bunch of documents together, and you have to make a convincing argument. Now, with this in the codes, I'm going to step a little bit into that process because we're not quite there yet. But once it's adopted into codes, this will mean that as long as you follow the codes, you can build a house based on those rules. If you want to do anything different than what's in the codes, you need an acceptance from like a structural engineer. You need a design basically that says these changes are okay. So it's a big step forward. Legitimacy. We start getting that approved. We start getting adopted into states. Hopefully this will make banks feel more comfortable. Hopefully this will make insurance feel more comfortable. Hopefully this is the beginning of opening up a lot of the doors that we're having issues with right now.
Okay.
So what just happened was we were approved. And if we get through to approval in October, the next step is adoption into the states. So even though we're approved into the model code, the states don't, it's not in the state code until it's adopted. Certain states, I believe like Maryland, just accept the code automatically. So that's an easy win. But after that, we'll have to seek adoption in other states in order to really have this on the books.
Okay, and that's like a lobbying effort. You have to go around to those individual states and like plead your case.
So I honestly don't know the strategy. Right now, we're forming the strategy. We're joining together with a coalition of other building groups because they're in the same boat. Like Straw Bale has had theirs approved for over a decade now, and still it's only in like, I think it's not in that many. I want to say less than half the states. That's for sure. So it is finding the right person to talk to and then talking to that person and asking them, what do we need to do for you to adopt this? So this is actually going to be an effort, almost like a campaign that the public can help with. If you know the right people, let us know who they are. If you're trying to do a project, we can turn your project and not just trying to get approval for your project, but trying to get the adoption of codes, which would, jump the entire state forward. So that this is going to be an ongoing effort for many years.
Okay, and let's talk about the qualities of hemp lime, hempcrete that make it an attractive building material. Can you touch on some of those?
Yeah. So I think we kind of break it down. We break it down to a couple categories. One is environmental. The building industry is somewhere between 35 and 40% of the carbon footprint in the world, between the materials that go into the buildings to the operation. We're talking about a material that goes into the building and can go into the building at, it depends on carbon negative or carbon positive, however you want to state it, but you are sequestering carbon in that wall. It's the carbon that's absorbed during the plant growth. And so we're taking carbon out of the air, trapping it into a plant, and then taking that plant and trapping it into stone. So that's just a carbon sinking process, which should help us to bring down some of the carbon in the environment. Mm-hmm. In the last 100 years, with the advent of widespread plastics uses, as well as heating and ventilation systems, the standard is to create a sealed box and then having a mechanical system, your heating or ventilation system, pumping air in and out, controlling the moisture and the temperature. This has caused issues because you've created a trap box. Anything you put inside the box is kind of stuck there. It can filter out at sometimes, but for the most part, most of it stays around. And then to improve the properties of the materials, especially with fire resistance, we're adding more chemicals into our houses. So now we have a sealed box that has chemicals inside of it that we are living.
And you're describing conventional construction right there.
Yeah. This is conventional construction. So now with hemp lime, we have an option of having a vapor open system. We don't need to use those chemicals because this is natural fire resistant, naturally mold resistant. It can prevent insects and termites to getting into the walls. So these things prevent the need for these chemicals and also provide a system that can regulate temperature better. So it requires less energy for your heating and ventilation systems. Mm-hmm. There's also, I got health, I got energy. I don't know. I know there's economics, but that's kind of a hard argument. And then there's social justice, but that's kind of a hard argument. That's kind of like our choice.
Right. Well, I think even like global shipping, right? If we can grow hemp locally, you're not going to be shipping, drywall from China that's going to mold or off gas or whatever. You're just going to have, local economies around this, right?
You're absolutely correct. What we have here is an opportunity to grow local economies. If anything, COVID has shown us our weaknesses in our supply chains. And this is a way that we can create a local supply chain for materials we need to do construction or to renovate current buildings. We would then be making them healthier, more environmentally friendly, higher performance, and creating jobs. Like you have farmers that can now grow a product. You have processors that need to process that product. you can keep money in your economy rather than shipping it to some far off place to get materials made that are of questionable quality. So,
right. Do you have a sense of how many hemp builders are out there in the U.S.? I mean, I know it's probably a small number, but it's growing all the time.
correct. That is an issue. I would guess dozens is the right number. I know there's a lot of people that have tried. I know hundreds have some type of experience.
Mm-hmm.
But when we talk about really legitimate builders, we maybe dozens,
Okay.
especially if you include those in Canada and those in Europe that are coming over here right now.
Okay.
The fact is that everyone can see this is a right market, and a lot of people are trying to get involved in it.
Right. I was just actually at a training session yesterday that Cameron McIntosh, whom you know, he put on a training session for the E-Reezy spray applied method. And there are a handful of people out there for that 3 or 4 day workshop. And I think there's another one coming up. But it seems like there's a lot of interest, and the people that are interested are just like really, really dedicated to it.
Yes, and what Cameron's doing is an example of the things that are required to open up the market. He has bringing a product to market that has been proven in other markets into the United States, training people on how to use it and selling it to people to use. This is how we scale up the workforce. We also are working on workforce development internally in the USHBA. We still have some, let's say, groundwork to take care of as far as what we've decided as our best practices are, which after this IRC submission will probably be one of my main focuses moving forward, is kind of getting consensus on what best practices are. But that is what we need, because right now, if we open up the ability to build with these houses, if we open up the financial and the insurance related issues regarding to these houses, the health and the environmental benefits speak for themselves. Suddenly we could see demand increase dramatically. And if we don't have the workforce to meet it, we'll have issues. Same thing with the supply chain. We need to be developing our supply chain domestically. Right now, Europe is struggling to keep up. They're shipping over what they can over here, but their market is growing as well. We need to create a domestic market.
Absolutely.
At the USHBA right now, we are working in ASTM to create standards or standard practices, standard test methods to test hemp hurt, so that we can start having, the list of these are the properties of my material so that they can sell into our building market.
Right. And then you could take those properties to a processor and say, hey, I need it, milled to this, this size or whatever, and they'll know what you need. Yeah.
And then the processor will have a list of tests that once you're done with it, send samples to this. And this is how we build quality control systems.
Okay.
I come from background in the automotive industry, and quality is everything. If you have a quality control issue and there's a recall, it's millions of dollars. So you have to set up systems in order to protect against that. We're not quite to that scale yet, but at the same time, automotive is looking at us. So we're not that far off. Right. We need to get quality systems in place in order to compete.
Well, let's talk about your backstory. How did you get into hemp in the first place?
Okay. So should I give my whole life story here, or
well, capsulize it if you can.
All right. So we'll just start around 30 or something. So I was a musician. I was playing. I had a background in material science and engineering. So I had this engineering degree and decided to get back into engineering. Got in, started helping a small plant make fuel tanks for boats. Really kind of got my hands dirty. It was a small business, which means that I did everything from quoting to designing to troubleshooting to working on the floor when it had to be done. It really was a good learning experience. Then from there, I moved up in the automotive industry, making car parts, took over program management, and was leading, over $13 million worth of facility projects that came in. All of this taught me a lot and kind of was the fire that made me what I am. the same time, it got to a point where I was looking at what I was doing with my life and it didn't have a meaning for me. I was helping a big corporation make a product that I didn't really agree with. I knew I had this skill set and I was like, what should I do with this skill set that would make me feel fulfilled? So I started, had gained my MBA over the last couple years in the automotive industry and was trying to figure out how I could figure this out into business. Ended up leaving the automotive industry and just playing with hemp and lime in my garage and just creating samples. So with my material science background, I'm like, I know how to do this. I've been working in processing for the last 8 years. I know how to tweak parameters and get somewhere. And it got to a point where you realize there's no market here. Like, even if I come up with the best product, who am I selling it to? And became an issue. And so I had to take a step back. Once I saw the USHBA and I saw the potential of collaborative work that could move the industry forward and make it viable for people to have careers here. And that's what motivated me and kind of got me involved.
Okay. Getting back to, hemp as a building material. So besides the code issues and, supply chain issues, what other challenges do the hemp builders have right now?
I guess the truth is this is a technology which is not fully understood. There are mistakes that have been made that we're trying not to repeat. This level of knowledge and having a very clear image of what needs to be done and what needs not to be done is something that we need to clarify and get organized in a presentable manner. So I would say a agreed upon solid base of knowledge.
Last week, I interviewed Sergey Kovalenkov at the NOCO Expo, and he talked about, the Bast Fiber Institute in Ukraine, and just how this is a repository for a whole lot of knowledge. And it's just so sad what's happening in Ukraine now. And he mentioned he's one of the founding members of the USHBA. But how closely do you work with folks in Europe and internationally to build this industry?
Well, first, Ukraine is a very tough situation for us. Sergey is still on the board. That when situation that was happening, he was in the middle of it.
Yeah.
On top of that, we have another board member who's a Ukrainian citizen, and her family was in East Ukraine, and luckily they made it out, but they made it out into Russia, and where there's a big push. They're trying to get out of Russia as fast as they can because that's not where they want to be, and that's not a good situation. So that's been a rough thing. As far as working with Europe, we're trying to open up paths and increase collaboration with the IRC process. When it came to original authorship, we did reach out to see if we could get participation. We didn't have much luck at that point, but we were lucky enough to get Kiko Thibault on our team, and he is very interconnected with both the UK and the French building groups. So he was able to be a conduit for a lot of information coming over from them. He's comes from a Haitian background, so he can speak French, and that's pretty priceless in this industry right now because the French have so much knowledge in this area. When it came to the review process, we did send it out, and we did have people review it in 7 countries, including Australia, including UK, including France, including Ukraine, of course, with Sergey, and Canada. I missed one somewhere, but a lot of countries, and
Sure.
A lot of good feedback, and we believe this is an international effort. It's funny because it's an international effort to build local economy-based systems, which is great, which is what we need to be doing.
Right. That's the paradigm shift that we need. Yeah. Can you talk about the team that you worked with to get the code stuff sort of through?
Yeah, I'll tell this story. Basically, we had the USHBF fundraising. We got funding in. Then we reached out to we reached out to the 2 best consultants in this area, which is Martin Hammer and David Eisenberg. They were involved in straw bale, straw clay, and Adobe appendices submissions to the IRC already, so they're very familiar with getting alternative building materials, getting natural building materials into the IRC appendices. And then we will send out a letter and try to send out some communications to our networks to try to figure out who could volunteer time, volunteer time to put forward towards this effort. We had Mary Dempsey from Impactful Ventures. She came in to help. They were coming from kind of a position where she didn't have a lot of knowledge, but she knows how to organize things, and like her program management abilities are amazing. So she came onto the team, and then she had a close relationship with Kiko, and brought Kiko Thabo onto the team. And that was the initial team. It was the 2 consultants and the 3 of us. And we started pushing forward and started with this base document that was it was a combination of straw bale and straw clay documents, cleaned it up, tried to make it fit to hemp, and then started going through and going line by line and going, what's wrong with this one? What's wrong with this one? Then we got a little bit of momentum at the Austin Hemp Build Summit. We were, kind of sent out a notification, hey, we need more help. We're getting somewhere, but we need assistance. At that point, Cameron McIntosh, Matt Marino, and Gary Fox stood up and said, we'll dedicate some time and help get this through. So then the 3 or the 5 of us became 8. And then we pulled on an engineer with a lot of background in this area, which is Anthony Dente. He works for the Cobb Institute and also Verdant Structural Engineers. And he came in and did the engineering work we needed to do in order to prove out that it could work in different seismic zones, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that's the base team. And then the review team split up into we got a couple dozen more people on the review team. So it was awesome.
Yeah, cool. That sounds great. It sounds like a great group of people making this happen. What else should listeners know about either the work you're doing, at the building level, or with the Hemp Building Association, or just hemp in general? So
I guess the key of all of this is there can be predictions, there can be forecasts, but nothing happens unless people do it. And energy is put in a positive manner, in a constructive manner, to get somewhere. We have done something to move this forward. There's still a long way to go, and we need more help, whether it's, volunteer time, whether it's financial assistance. There's so much more work to do. Now that we've gotten into the residential codes, we need to do testing to improve those residential codes. Now we can also look at getting into the commercial codes, which comes up in 2 years. We also need to be looking at technological advances. This market is developed, and as great as these products are, haven't gone through the thorough R&D practices that other materials have gone through. Once we start opening up the money and R&D is put into this, our properties are going to expand, and we're going to improve our vapor permeability, our thermal conductivity. We will improve all these things with scientific method and approach.
Okay, and I imagine as the industry grows, the price is going to come down too, making it a more affordable option for people who want to live in a hemp home, right?
Yes, we do live in a capitalist country. And the great thing about capitalism is competition and how we can benefit from it. As we get more competition, as more technology gets out there, as we increase in our economies of scales and there's more farmers growing this, as hemp fiber and hemp grain become more widely used, and this byproduct of hemp hurd is more accessible at a more affordable price, all these things will grow the industry,
right?
Grow potential.
Yeah. What's neat about, I watch the hemp industry, I sort of cover it for the newspaper and the podcast, and there is this spirit of cooperation amongst the various people. And it just seems like, is this also part of the paradigm shift, or is this like necessary cooperation to grow the industry, and then healthy competition will come in once there's more of an established base?
So it's a combination. There's definitely some competition. I have this fellow organizational person, Frederick Cotham, that's part of Hemp Alliance Tennessee here that calls it coopetition.
Yeah.
And I think that is the idea is there it's a competitive market. We need to be real about that. And especially as we advance and move forward, you're probably going to need to hustle and bustle to compete with, the other people in the market. But it's a small pie right now. And we need to focus on growing that pie so everyone can eat. And if we do that, it helps everyone's business. So yes, there's cooperation. And I am one of those people, and I know there's a handful of us that want it to stay that way forever. But we're realistic, and we know that that's probably not going to happen. But we also know from a business standpoint that those people that want to be competitive, it is the best option for them to grow the industry more than to focus on their own company. Because if we do things like we just did with the building codes, we can turn dozens of houses into hundreds of houses, into thousands of houses, into possibly grabbing a percentage of the market. If we try to do that as a single company, there's not going to be enough faith built up fast enough. This is an acceleration process. So coopetition is the word.
If people are interested in supporting the U.S. Hemp Building Association or Foundation, where can they find you?
So you can find us at ushba.org, and there you'll find a donate page to the U.S. Hemp Building Foundation if you want to donate. You can find lots of information on our website. The foundation is a 501c3 organization, so that's tax deductible. The association's a 501c6 membership, so please become a member.
Okay. And can people learn about volunteer opportunities there?
They can. Most of the volunteers we pull from our membership. But recently we did have a volunteer, unpaid internship sort of thing we just went through. We're actually announcing the candidates that we're going to be accepting in about a week and a half. But those will probably be coming up more frequently as we figure out like specific needs that we have. Okay.
But basically people should become members.
Become a member, come to the committee meetings, see what we're doing. If you think you can contribute, you can become part of the work groups. The work groups are doing the work.
Awesome. All right. Well, Jacob, again, congratulations on the code proposal approval. This is just really proud of what you guys are doing down there, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, and again, thank you for having me. And keep going. We're better together.
That was Jacob Waddell from the U.S. Hemp Building Association, and I'll put a link to their organization on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com, along with the links to the news nuggets. Oh, hey, and also, in that interview, I mentioned that I had gone to a Hempcrete workshop led by Cameron McIntosh at Amerishon Cast Hemp, and so I interviewed him while I was there, so we'll hear this quick interview with Cameron. Hey, Cameron, what's happening here today?
Not much, man. How are you, Eric? Thanks for coming. Glad to have you here.
So, thoughts on the workshop so far?
Really good. Yeah, we have a small group of 7 people here today. And then on Thursday this week, we've got another group of 10 coming.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was really great. As planned, gave them a good overview of more than just how to spray in terms of operating the business around, running an e-Reezy spray system. So we bared it all.
All right. How far did people travel to get here today?
Well, we've got a pair from France. They definitely win the cup. That would be Damien and his wife Celine from France. Then we've got Andrea.
He's the inventor of the system, though,
correct.
Right?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So it's really fun to have him here. He's troubleshooting in the background right now. And then we've got Andrea as a contractor from Florida. And then we've got a guy, Connor, out here from Montana, whose uncle actually is one of the first to purchase the American version of the e-Reezy system. So really fun group. And then we've got a couple local guys. We got some from Hudson, New York, one from Lancaster. So we're building our network here locally.
All right, good.
Yep.
I heard you gave a presentation for the ICC code hearing yesterday. Can you tell me how that went?
Yeah, it was really great. Actually, it was Saturday, the day that we started the workshop. We had just gotten done spraying, so I looked at my phone, as tends to happen on spray days. I don't get to check my emails or look at my texts until everything's turned off. But I got a text from Jacob, the director at the U.S. Hemp Building Association, to say that they had been successful and that our IRC index was recommended for approval by the committee. So that is the major hurdle in that process. We're now in a period of open commentary where essentially the index is going to have public comments made, and then also the writers, that small team that I was a part of, will have an opportunity to expand on the points that are made in the index, which are written to be very clear and concise for code purposes. But as a subscriber to IRC, you can download and get access to the commentary. So it's where we expand things that weren't appropriate to put in the actual hard code language can be expanded upon, so that code officials can then take a look at them and have more reference and more detail.
Okay.
So really exciting. The path now leads us to about September or October when it will be fully approved by ICC. And then from there, individual states have different timelines for when they accept updates to the IRC.
Okay.
So even though the individual state may not yet have approved or accepted that update, it will still help greatly to say that we have an active national IRC index when we have discussions with code enforcement. So,
Okay. Yeah, well, tell me about how having that approval will help what you do.
Right. So basically, it's the IRC is our governing body for residential code, residential building code. It covers everything: framing, finishes, structural details, all of that. So now that we have an appendix for hemp lime construction, as we called it, for the purpose of the code to be, again, very specific. Hempcrete's a little bit misleading. It will basically make it so that anyone who's motivated to do so could build up to a one-story home following this IRC code with Hempcrete. That sounds like a limitation, but it's not. What it means essentially is that if you want to do something more athletic, more architectural, 2 stories, something larger, that you have to have your own engineered drawings that also echo this code. So again, it sounds like a limitation, but it really isn't. It makes it very accessible. You as a homeowner, if you want to build a one-story home, meaning 25 feet off grade, you can do so without any further engineering drawings once you have this code. So it really lays out for the code official how the material interacts with our traditional framing techniques for residential buildings. So it will only make it easier.
Cool. Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Cheers, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. All right, so that pretty much does it for me today. But before I go, I want to give a shout out to one of our listeners. His name is Ben. He is a beginning regenerative no-till farmer and beekeeper. He's been listening to our show from the very beginning, from the very first episode. He says he loves our show. Thank you for that, Ben. He wrote to me in response to my call out a few weeks ago for suggestions for a new name. Remember that I mentioned that our marketing people don't like the name Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast? And they want me to change it. So I'm just putting it out there. Like, what would you call this show if you had to rename it? And I'm still accepting suggestions. Email your ideas to me at podcast@LancasterFarming. They can be serious. They can be not so serious. But, hit me up. Anyway, so Ben says, now that your show has a greater focus on regenerative farming, how about the name Lancaster Farming Generation of Regeneration Podcast? I like that. Good suggestion, Ben. Thank you for that. And thank you for listening to our show and for emailing me and for your kind words. All right, so my name is Eric Herlock. I'm the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. All right, until next time, I will see you in the newspaper.
industrial hemp.
This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2022 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show is written and recorded, edited, and produced by yours truly, Eric Harlock. Any music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.